So here we are at the end of 10th edition. We have so many moving plot points going on right now, but most of them are just the announcements of these plot points happening and the very vague, basic outlines of them. So what can we expect from these plot points? Well, we can always look back at how they closed out 9th edition. So that is what we will be doing today. I am your host, Inquisitor Calliope, and we will be summarizing the storyline we saw at the end of 9th edition, which introduced us to VASHTORR and the Lion himself. Join me for this video on the Arks of Omen. Before we get into the story, let's get through some YouTube pleasantries. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and ring that bell down below to warn everybody that VASHTORR is coming. And without further ado, let's get into the story. The Arks of Omen story was actually pretty interesting because 2 of the 5 books actually had pretty decently little to do with the overarching story of the series as a whole. Those being Commander Farsight's book and Angron's book. In order to see what I mean, we have to start with the first book, Arks of Omen, Abaddon. Arks of Omen Abaddon largely goes over how Abaddon met VASHTORR. So Abaddon was chilling on the Vengeful Spirit after a pretty rough battle, overlooking the damages and wondering what he will do next. Down in the lower decks of his ship, a bunch of Dark Mechanicum boys were getting together trying to perform a ritual without Abaddon's permission in order to help him fix up his ship. They thought that by doing this, they would get into Abaddon's good graces, which, I don't know, doing something against Abaddon's will seems pretty solidly like a bad idea when it comes to being a part of the Black Legion's crew. So back up on the deck, Abaddon starts to see the effects of the ritual taking hold over the ship. He immediately orders for them to be found, and they do, but not before a face appears in his floor. This face belongs to none other than VASHTORR the Archifane himself, and he invites Abaddon to parley. And Abaddon, obviously being very cautious because he knows demons, accepts, not before destroying the Dark Mechanicum elements that summoned VASHTORR in the first place, though. However, this demon summoning really went a lot different than they usually do. VASHTORR didn't immediately start trying to take control. He just popped up and said, "Hey, I want to talk to you," which gave Abaddon quite a bit of pause because that's not how demons act. So he obviously accepts. They go into the engine room to parley, and Abaddon immediately sees how VASHTORR is different as a demon. He is very forthcoming and honest with the terms of a deal, which Abaddon is able to see into, and he does not tell any lies. He still speaks oddly because he is a demon, but his speech is not rife with lies like demons usually are. And as it turns out, what VASHTORR wants is actually very simple. He wants Abaddon's help collecting 3 MacGuffins. In return, he is offering Abaddon his services, offering him massive ships called Arks of Omen that will be extremely useful in any naval fight they take a part in, as well as an alliance between his demonic forces and Abaddon's Black Legion. Abaddon, obviously suspicious of him, asks him why he wants to make this MacGuffin, and VASHTORR plainly says that there is something within the webway locked away in some kind of vault from back in the war in heaven. This machine will not only help Abaddon win the war, but he does plainly say that this will help him ascend to Chaos Godhood. He just straight up tells Abaddon that. And he wants to do that because he hates the Chaos God's great game, which he says will destroy the universe, and he recognizes that as a very bad thing. So if he can ascend, he can maybe join the great game and stop them from this doom spiral they are in. Abaddon hears this, can tell VASHTORR is not lying, and goes, "You know what? Yes, I will absolutely accept your help." And so, the hunt for the MacGuffins begins. After VASHTORR, as a show of goodwill, something very rare for demons, fixes the Vengeful Spirit for him, and starts work on creating these Arks of Omen. But for the most interesting part of this story, we have to get to the end of it. When the 3 devices, the Tutultra engine, the Ouroboros, and the Plague Heart, are all brought together and brought to a specific location in order to build the key. Here we join with the best of the books, in my personal opinion, Arks of Omen 5, Lion L. Johnson. This book opens up with the Dark Angels wanting the run back on VASHTORR because he stole their T'Chulcha engine and they want it back. So they are trying to find where VASHTORR is when VASHTORR openly contacts them and gives them some coordinates as a sort of challenge. Knowing this is a trap but not wanting to turn down the challenge and bring dishonor to their chapter, the Dark Angels assemble as many of the Dark Angels' successor chapters as they can and start making their way to the coordinates. And when they get there, they find a planet surrounded by VASHTORR'S horrid demon fleet of demonic entities, honestly. A couple of them are kinda ships, but a couple of them, there's one that's just an eyeball with wings that is ship-sized, so it's spooky and actually really cool chaos stuff. But the Dark Angels aren't worried about that. They noticed something off about the planet that they were asked to come to, and they point their picked feeds towards it, and immediately their suspicions are confirmed. As studying the coastlines, the edges of the forests, the lines of the continents themselves, they understand that VASHTORR has found and put back together their planet of Caliban, which VASHTORR is named Wormwood. Being understandably immediately enraged by this, the Dark Angels make for preparing for planetfall. Now, before they do this, they consult the Emperor's Tarot and the Oracles, which is a custom that they do before any sort of battle. And I don't remember exactly what the vision itself was, something about a mirror showing them and then it shatters. But the important part is this was interpreted as there is going to be some massive surprises. One that looks like them, and one that will be against them. So they go down onto the planet and start fighting towards the biggest energy spot down there. And when they get there, it's an 8-pointed brass star, and Angron explodes out of it. So things are going extremely terribly for them on the surface of this planet. And then suddenly another ship arrives overhead, hails them, and gives them its call sign. It is the flagship of the Blood Angels. Immediately, this is really bad because of how secretive the Dark Angels are. They do not like the fact that the Blood Angels have now seen Caliban in its corrupted depravity and know their connection to it. However, the next news shocks them even more. The Blood Angels say that Commander Dante is there and he has brought Lion L. Johnson. There's several moments of silence over all of the Vox, and then everybody starts screaming, asking questions, demanding answers of the Blood Angels, but there's a war that they're fighting down on the surface, and there's a big red angel tearing through their forces, so they just say, okay, we don't care, just give us help. And help indeed does arrive, as suddenly, where there were not before, plants and foliage start to appear on the surface of Caliban. And then out of that strides Widow's Peak himself. Lionel Johnson joins the fray down on the planet below. Moving over to the Lion's point of view, he immediately hears that Angron is on the surface and is tearing up his sons, so he immediately goes to fight Angron. And bada bing, bada boom, we get the best duel we have seen from Warhammer in a good few years. Lionel Johnson armed with the Shield of the Emperor, and Angron the Red Angel armed with the Anger of Khorne. They immediately get into it. The Lion is actually a pretty good duelist. However, this is peak Angron boosted in power because of the Cicatrix Maledictum. As good as the Lion is, it's the Shield of the Emperor that ultimately keeps him safe, taking the 5 billion attacks that Angron levies against him and slamming them back with a pulse of golden light when enough energy has been absorbed. This gives Lionel Johnson the edge that he needs in order to fight Angron into a Manufactorum, where Angron immediately starts going all Predator on him, hiding in the smoke and everything. But when he eventually leaps out of the Lion takes a knee, points his sword up at his neck, and lets the momentum do the rest. Angron is stabbed through the neck and is banished right then and there. At this point, though, the planet itself is starting to shift and move as machines all over it start to awaken, as VASHTORR was given enough time to complete his key. his wormwood, as he calls it. The Dark Angels immediately evacuate the planet, and Lion obviously forced steps out of there. And from a distance, a lone Inquisitor watches as a webway portal is torn open, and the planet Wormwood is slowly pulled into it. He sits there for a second, asking himself why this is happening. Why did the Eldar let this happen? It's so strange. And unfortunately, we still don't have that answer 3 years later. Because for now, that is essentially where the story ends when it comes to big, important events involving VASHTORR. I have no doubt that we will get some over the course of 10th edition, but so far it's looking like unless he is involved with Perturabo, I don't think we're going to see much of him at the opening. But for now, that's the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed, and share this with somebody you think would like it as well. I have been your host, Inquisitor Calliope, and I will see you next time. Bye!